Okay, I'd like to give you all a very warm welcome to this meeting of the Truth Memory Preparatory Committee, which is organised on the People's Struggle for a Democratic Future. And I'd like to thank you all very much for coming to the meeting. I know there's a lot on with the election, so it's very important that we have some discussion about what the future of democratic future of the people of Britain are, even though it's an election on. So we're very pleased you come. I'd just like to say that the Truth and Memory Committee came about at the end of last year when we decided to put on a meeting about the real story behind the First World War, and that proved a success, and people wanted to carry on. So we put on another meeting in April on the 70th anniversary of NATO, that there was only one world and the use of force to settle conflicts throughout the world should no longer go on. And then in the summer we had a joint meeting with the Save South Tyneside Hospital campaign on the whole history and fight to safeguard the future of the NHS. And following that, it all seemed to emphasise, when we discussed it afterwards, that the whole question of people's empowerment was central to the question of war, central to the question of people building a better and new life for themselves. So we thought it would be very important to take it just up on that alone. And also we thought it was very important because, as you know, over the last year or so, it's been almost impossible for the ruling elite to settle scores with themselves within the parliamentary system, let alone actually empower the people to make decisions. So the whole parliamentary system and its nature of disempowering people was becoming exposed. So we thought it was very important to do it from that point of view. So hence we've organised this meeting today, and I think it's very apt because many of you in the audience are involved in the Safe South Tyneside Hospital campaign, or locally in Citizens Assembly, South Tyneside, and in the trade unions as well. So you become, although it's a small audience, it's people who are organised in various movements throughout the area. And as I say, there's election going, a lot of people would have been here and now involved in the election. But so it's not really a hustings. So it's extremely important, though, that we voice the concerns of the people on empowerment and discuss the truth and memory of this issue, and thus making a contribution to deal with the blocks of progress and the demand for changes at work, as well as all of us to take a stand against the establishment in the election, which goes without saying. So I think that sort of sums up, and I'd like to give a very big thanks to David and the rest of the preparatory committee for the work they've put in to put on what is a multimedia show. But the most important thing about this is of course the talks that have been presented and the discussion that ensues. So we'll have plenty of time to discuss questions and contributions to the discussion. And I appreciate our speakers for coming. I'll speak about them when I introduce them a bit more, but we've got Lesley Larkum on my left, who's speaking about empowerment and giving rise to the modern democratic personality. And on my right, Keith Hussain, who's speaking about citizens' movements in the struggle for empowerment. But first of all, we'd like to start with a couple of very short films. First one, if you remember when the government tried to prorogue Parliament, and of course, as you know, they wanted to prorogue it for 5 weeks to stop parliamentary politicians like Jeremy Corbyn and other Emma Lawbuck and all of those that wanted to take a stand in the Parliament from actually saying anything. So that, as you know, got overturned by the courts this time, unlike the postal workers were, even though they got a 97% vote in favour of strike action, they were told that the ballot was undemocratic. Anyway, in this instance, we showed what the just a short film on the demonstrator. Then the second one is on the Extinction Rebellion, and it's linked to a film we showed later because one of the daughters of a filmmaker that we're going to show his film on the history of Durham miners. His daughter was arrested at Extinction. Unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago, a close friend of mine. But his daughter was arrested in Extinction Rebellion, and of course they fought that. And now I think I'm not sure if I'm right in saying that although she got convicted, they're going to have to overturn that because that was unlawful. So if you wanted to show the two films, please, David.
Shame on you!
Thanks very much for that, David. As you can see, that sets the scene as the people are fighting for empowerment. So our first speaker is Lesley Larkum, and I just wanted to say just a few things about Lesley. She's come all the way from East Dulwich to be with us today. She's a close friend of ours. We've worked with her on a number of occasions. She's actually she's come via Australia actually. She's worked in Britain for the last few years. She's in the forefront of new music, in developing new music in London. She's she wouldn't say herself, she's a wonderful musician. And she works with progressive musicians in London. Anyway, before I forget, she's going to speak. She's actually been studying the question of empowerment, and particularly in relation to Hobbes and also to the modern situation that we're in. So I'm sure she'll have some interesting things to say to us, and then we can open it up for discussion. So over to you, Lesley.
Thank you very much. It's kind of interesting seeing those films just before I start, because society is completely riven at the moment. There's so many contending issues and views, but it's not that it's 50-50 split. It's like there's a civil war almost emerging, and that is the issue is like how do you reckon with this? How do you understand what's going on, and how do you see what's going on? My contention is that this is what I want to talk about. That the origins of today's conflict, in all aspects, what you see going on there in terms of environmental change, in terms of anti-war, in terms of Brexit, is actually an opening up of a rift that was, the genie was put back in the box like 400 years ago. So it's just interesting to see those images, because you see people are rising up all over, not just in Britain, but all over the world. And they're speaking in their own name, they're demanding their own voice, they're demanding to be heard, and contending with elites in power who really don't want to hand over any power. They're keeping the decision making for themselves, and then sort of trying to keep the illusion that it's our decision. So it's a sort of sleight of hand. My talk then is to really focus on what were the origins of this, and my contention is that it begins with Hobbes and Cromwell back in 1649, and even before that. So that there was as you know, the English, there was a civil war raging in England back in the 1600s, early 1600s, and that came to a head around 1641, 1642. And led to the demise of Charles I, and led to the beheading of Charles I. And then that posed a real problem. And the problem was that, as you know, before and under Charles I, there was the conception of a divine right. We did have a parliament, of course, which went way back, but the king essentially still had that right to make decisions, and he got his authority from God. And up until Charles I, the arrangement had been that you didn't name that. Yeah, so the parliament had its influence, and it was made up of barons and bishops and so on. And they would advise the king, and there was a kind of repartee between the two. But come Charles I, he had anyone one can go into the history of that, but basically he wouldn't recognise this right and claimed that right to absolute rule. And that set the whole of English society into crisis, because it exposed that the common people and the, well, in fact, everybody was not having a say in the running of their society. And society was changing very rapidly. So you had, trade was opening up, and as you know, I mean, coming from Australia, you know, so pre-even Australia, colonisation of Australia by Britain, and it sort of, you can see this expansion starting at the time. So it's quite interesting that what happened then was you had this English Civil War erupt, and everything was up for grabs, you know, what's going to happen. So you had the levellers, you had all sorts of people in discussion or puppy debates, you had people saying, you know, they wanted the whole, the apprentices, you had the Puritans, and they each had their view on how society should go forward. And amidst all of that, they beheaded Charles I. With the beheading of Charles I, it's clear that a major crisis then struck, because the whole point about the king at that time, the relations between the people and the king, is that the king has the authority of God. So he is God on earth, and he invoked that authority. So as soon as you kill the king, you've effectively killed God, or you've certainly killed the authority of God on earth. So how do you now proceed? So that was the English Civil War in a nutshell, you could say. What happens now? How do you solve this? So the reason why I'm even addressing this is because, to me, it's clear that the crisis we're facing now is that civil war, which was stopped at that time, and I'll talk about how they stopped it and what was given rise to at the time, has now erupted again. And it's there in the form of the contention between the ruling elites, trying to sort out the problems and manifestly unable to do so, and largely because the authority that was re-established to maintain their control and their power is now breaking down. So the dysfunction of Parliament and the politics that we see going on in Britain is a reflection of this, the authority just completely going. We no longer recognise that authority. So I'm just going to, I won't go on too long, but in fact I'll try and keep it short. But this is my contention. I thought I'd start with something rather humorous. Are you all familiar with 1066 and all that? Yes? Yes?
No, I don't think.
Oh, you're not familiar with it? It's a wonderful book. It's written by two history teachers back in the 1930s. And what they did, well, that they said they did, is that they cobbled together the essays written by students, and they put it as a kind of history of Britain up to the present day. And I thought I'd just read to you, because it's so germane to what we're going to be talking about today, the chapter pertaining to the Magna Carta, right? So this was what was drawn up as the kind of the new laws pertaining to Britain under King John. So it goes like this, and of course it's all students writing and they get it wrong. It says, is that a unitractional? Yes? Tell me if I need to say more. Anyway, let me just... Yeah. Let me read you what these students have said, and it's just hilarious, because actually it kind of cuts to the heart of it. I think actually they got it right, but they get it wrong, if you know what I mean. So this is chapter 19, Magna Charta. There also happened in this reign the memorable charter known as the Magna Charta, on account of the Latin magna, great, and charter, a charter. This was the first of the famous charters and garters of the realm, and was invented by the barons on a desert island in the Thames called Ganymede. By congregating there, armed to the teeth, the barons compelled John to sign the Magna Charta, which said, 1. That no one was to be put to death, save for some reason, in brackets, except the common people. 2. That everyone should be free, in brackets, except the common people. 3. That everything should be of the same weight and measurement throughout the realm, in brackets, except the common people. 4. That the courts should be stationary, instead of following a very tiresome medieval official known as the King's Person all over the country. 5. That no person should be fined to his utter ruin, except the King's Person. 6. That the barons should not be tried except by a special jury of other barons who would understand. Magna Charta was therefore the chief cause of democracy in England, and thus a good thing for everyone, in brackets, except the common people. So it's quite a nice quote there to begin with. Let's get to because I think what it points to is the relations. Like someone's trying to sum up there what was the code, what were the relations in society at that time. So let's now talk about what happened in 1649. So in 1649, you had the introduction of covenant thesis and a new way of running things. So the issue was, as we said, that there was civil war brewing in England and no authority. And as we know, the Levelers were discussing, everyone was discussing like what sort of democracy, what sort of rights should now be brought into being. So then it's emerged that what Hobbes what Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell did, was he actually consulted Hobbes, who was a philosopher at the day, and said, how can we tackle this? And their express aim, we know from reading their letters and reading their comments on this, was that under no circumstances could you allow the mob to come to power. In other words, the mass. The common people must at all costs not be part of the political arrangements. And I think that's very important to know, because what then was brought into being is our modern parliamentary system. So what happened? What was the mechanism for doing this? So the issue is, like, there's no authority. So how do you vest authority in something? So on the table was, as is now, that project was put on the back burner, was a democracy that actually incorporated the mass of the people, the common people. How could you enable a modern democracy that took account of the voice and the voices of all the people, and brought into being a type of society that paid attention to the needs and desires of all the people? However, Cromwell and Hobbes stopped that project, and the way they did it was they brought into being this conception of an artificial person of state. Are you all familiar with this? Has there been, no? So it's a very interesting conception, this. So they said, okay, we've killed the king, we've killed the authority of God via the king. Let's now create an artificial being that could be anything. It could be a book, it could be a chair, it could be a person. But the issue is that you and I, as the common people, now enter into a relation with it. So this artificial person of state, we embody it, we give it authority as the pinnacle or the authority over the new state. And in the new state, now the relations are defined by you and I entering into a covenant with this artificial state, person of state. And what we say is we give over our right to decide things. We get the right to be a citizen in this new modern nation, but we give over the right to make decisions pertaining to us, or any decisions, to parties that will represent us. And they brought into being this conception of two parties that would vie for or contend for power and sit in the parliament to make decisions on our behalf, on the behalf of the mass. And in fact, the term used by Hobbes was the mob. And it derives from Latin modulare something or other, which means that those people, the vulgar people, the mass of the people, who were, in the view of Hobbes and Cromwell, absolutely unfit to make any decisions because, one, they were uneducated, two, they did not own land, and so Hobbes's view was, and Cromwell, that they could not be responsible because they didn't care, basically. They didn't have a link to anything that you could pin. But thirdly, they were so unpredictable. Now, what does that remind you of? So in today's society, is that not what's happening? We're having these referendums, and they're sure that it's going to be Remain, and now, damn, the people went the other way. So, and then you have all the argument about whether it was valid or not, and whatever, but the issue is they can't predict anything anymore. So you're seeing parallels in this history. So anyway, just to come back to this arrangement that was set up. So then what they had done is they said, in this state, in order to be part of the state, you're either one of these political parties, in which case you're a decision maker, or you're part of the mob. And the mob, as I say, were these the unpredictable mass, basically, that were very unruly and were demanding all sorts of things. We're going to put them in their place by saying, you must enter into a covenant with the person of state and with the state as such. And that covenant says that you will now, basically no longer, you don't have a right to decide. You have no voice, but you do have a voice because your voice is now invested in one of these political parties, which they decided. Do you see? So then Hobbes and Cromwell recognised the existing, Royalist Party, which had formed in 1641, 1642, and then you had the other interests of the Whigs and whatever. And basically, you could say that the parties then were able to represent the ruling elites at the time, and everybody else had to go along with that, basically. And so was born this idea of a parliamentary system where your voice is represented, all right? Now, the issue there, so this is the covenant thesis. So the issue there in this is that largely they brought an end to the Civil War, the English Civil War, with this decision. And later this was elaborated and it's been tweaked and changed over the years. But what you see going through the last 400 years, nearly 400 years, is that this is what we've had. We've had a liberal democracy, or a form of parliamentary democracy, which gives rise, presents these parties, and then the arrangement is that you and me, we vote for whoever we want every couple of years, and they're supposed to get on with it and do what they do. And then we go away, we don't have a say. So in the modern era, what's being given rise to? So you could say what was given rise to then was this, and it solved the Civil War. What's happening now is that the Civil War has reared its head again. And the question is, why has it done so? What's going on? So you could say that what did sort out the problems of the ruling elites then no longer works. You can see the contentions coming again. People vying for power, vying for claiming authority, and essentially that authority has broken down. So now what we're seeing is all sorts of things being done in the name of the people using these old arrangements. So for instance, take a random example, the war in Iraq. So in 2003, it enabled Tony Blair to actually come out and say, I know that 80% of the people are opposed to war. I know that 80% of the people actually, in an election, would vote against this. However, as the Prime Minister, I have to act on my conscience. I do not have to represent the view of the people. I have been elected to represent you, and I can represent my voice, because I'm not representing your voice, I'm representing you, if you know what I mean. So that's the contention, and that's where things begin to break down. So now, if I could sort of flip to the present day, I wanted just to talk about what's then being given rise to, because it seems that what then is jarring for all of us is that the interests, what the politicians and these big political parties seem to be representing, is out of step now with what the vast majority of people are calling for. And one of the main things is that we want our voice. In a modern democratic society, it's no longer the case that we're an ignorant mass, if they ever were an ignorant mass, but we certainly are not an ignorant mass now. We have our voice. You have people, as you see in that film, demonstrating and very clear about their concerns for the environment, about people very clear about their need for healthcare for all, that healthcare should be a right. And it seems like an obvious thing to say it. Is it not obvious that healthcare should be a right for all human beings in society on the basis that you're a human being, and not on the basis that, oh, you're a citizen of London or you're this or that? It can't be in a modern society that we differentiate and say, oh, this person's just arrived from Syria, they don't have the same rights as I do. Why not? It doesn't make sense. And I think for your average person, that it's like an obvious thing. Education should be a right for all, should it not? Why would you discriminate? On what basis are you going to discriminate? You cannot do it. There has to be a modern conception. And so I was just going to do a little quote here, because it's like what's going on is that the powers that be are trying to deprive us of an outlook. So here's a quote from this lovely, it's called The Here and Now, from the Memory Resource Centre. And it's just a brief quote. He says, or it says, the emphasis on apocalypse now, the world as unthinkable, is to deprive us of an outlook. Depriving us of an outlook is a form of coercion equal to the bombs and guns and corruption and bribery used by the rulers to remain in power. We need our own outlook, our own politics, our own organisation. We need our own concepts like those of democracy. So then that raises, so what then is that? What democracy? Like they're claiming they have democracy, they are representing us and they get on with it and we should just be quiet and just vote for them. And so it's an interesting notion that in this recent call for the election, that they had to actually pass a new bill, because this bill was called the Early Parliamentary General Election Act. So that was passed on October 31st. And the reason they passed that one was because they'd only just passed an act in September 2011 saying it was a fixed-term parliamentary act, assuring us that from here on in that elections would only be held every 5 years, and that's to save money and to stop all the confusion and all kind of wasting of, public time and effort, whatever. And then, what is it, 8 years later? They're now passing another act in order to say, oh no, actually we need an early election now, because that didn't sort out the problem. So you can say that, you can see from this the incoherence that's now operating. You could say that it's certain that the election that's coming will sort out nothing, certainly for the ruling elites, and certainly not for us as the working class of people. It's not intended to solve anything actually for us. They're desperately trying to solve their problem, and their problem is that they can't sort out anything at the moment. They're in crisis. So how do you sort out this crisis? So it's like what you could say is that the old parliamentary system, and in all its mechanisms, all that was set in place all those years ago, just simply doesn't function anymore. And the old mechanisms, like you could say it did sort out things during Hobbes' time to an extent, in that it allowed power to flow from one party in office to another party in opposition. But both actually, even then, represented the status quo. So now what's happening is, it doesn't sort anything out. And the powers that be can no longer look towards a champion who will provide a measure of stability. It just simply doesn't work. So they look around, don't they, and they say, oh, Boris, he's like an interesting personality, we'll stick him in power. And then, well, anyway, need I say more? Anyway, so then you can look and you say, well, what is this election meant to do? Well, it's not meant to sort out problems facing the people. It's not about us. It's not about what's going to serve the environment, what's going to be anti-war, what's going to bring about a better health service, better education service, what's going to provide for the rights of all. It's not about that. It's about now bickering between these ruling elites and trying to sort out something which essentially they cannot sort out. So the issue now is that the working class and people are the ones who have to sort this out. We can make a difference. And the only way we can make a difference is by drawing this veil away. And no longer buying into this idea that if you vote for Boris or you vote for, whatever in the ruling elites, that's going to change anything. So the issue now is really to prevent the Conservatives from forming a majority. They are like smashing everything. And they don't care. There's very little, they're not taking any care in this, And anyway, Roger can say more on this later, or Keith. But it seems to me that that's our objective at the moment. And to recognise that what's necessary is actually to focus on forming an anti-war government. So, sorry, I've gone on a bit. Let me just come now to what would be necessary in order to do that. So my talk was about giving rise to the modern democratic personality. So amidst all of this stuff going on, the breaking down of authority, the contentions between the ruling elites, especially as you see the Conservatives and Brexit power and whatever going on at the moment, is that you see now a new conception coming to the fore. And that is actually this conception of a modern democratic personality, which comes out of the ensemble of recognizing the ensemble of human relations. So this ensemble of human relations, which is, and what is being revealed by this, indispensable relations, most importantly, the need for political power. So that's the kind of conception that's being brought into being at the moment. And that this modern democratic personality is that personality that wants to harmonise the relations, is the person that stands up for anti-war, stands up for the rights of all on the basis of being human, that stands up for the need for healthcare for all, and sees that the issue is that you place the issue of social care and healthcare at the centre, rather than it being an issue of affordability, the starting point being governments allow a certain amount of money and then you're allowed to divide it up and so on. No, the issue is not that. The issue is what conception have we got for a modern society fit for all human beings, and one based on the resources that we create and a vision that we bring into being. The issue to solve the civil war now is that the outlook needs to be one of a people-centered outlook, one that is not, it's not that you don't take account of what's going on, like we can talk about tactics and whatever, but it's like what do you put in place. We have now what's opened up, that was opened up under Hobbes and Cromwell, this democratic project that was on the table then and that was, if you like, put on the back burner, has come to the fore again. And we now need all of us to bring our thinking to that, because we are doing it. We need to speak in our own voice. We need to bring our own thinking to solving the problems of the day and no longer rely on which of these champions is going to represent our voice, because they don't, and they are not. Anyway, sorry, is that coherent?
It is very good.
Okay. I might just stop there and we can have further discussion anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, that was very good, Leslie. It was exactly half an hour. I know you were worried about how long, and it brought it to a very coherent conclusion. So, yes, as Lesley says, we can have discussion. So, let's have some discussion on this question. I mean, I've put Hobbes up there.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Maybe first of all explain.
Oh, yes, do you mind if I just say a few words? This is cover for Hobbes's Leviathan, which I think was published in 1663 or something, or it was sometime later after the establishment of the initial state under covenant thesis. But if you look, you've got the Leviathan, and he's wearing a crown. And sorry, just go over there so to show you. Can you see this figure here is the artificial person of state, and you see he's carrying the orb of the church. And if you look down here, here is the bishop's house, the bishop's hat, his staff, and these are the various structures of the church. So you could say that represents the one wing of this covenant, that you've got the moral authority and the ethical domain, and then on the other side is the rule of law, is the military, is the judiciary, is the courts, the crown, and the canon. It's quite interesting, they put all these, so you've got these two wings of the state, and they are the wings of the modern state. And one of the, then what's most interesting, can you see what looks like a vest that he's wearing? That, if you look closer, and you can't see it on this picture very well, but they are loads of people. And they are the common people. Yes, can you see now? And they are looking up into his face, right? So that's the covenant, that all the people are in the body of the state. They are the body of the people. But they are, if you like, suspended between the arms of state, as in the moral and the legal, and they sit there in looking upwards in awe at the artificial person of state, right? And at that stage, when they first came up with this conception, they didn't have a person. It was literally a chair, yeah? So it's where you get this conception of chairman and so on. You get a personage that represents that power. And later, of course, they brought back Charles II, and then he became that role. But he was told in no uncertain terms that he had no power except and until he accepted this relation. Do you see? And so that's why, if any of you have seen this series, The Crown, whoever made that program knows their Hobbes. In fact, several of the chapters, some of the episodes, are named after chapters in his book. Now, it's so interesting because Elizabeth today is the embodiment of that artificial person of state. She has power because of this covenant thesis of the relations. And we give that power because that's the arrangement, you could say. Yeah? And it enables everything that we know today in Britain. And that's what's under contention. That's why it's so difficult. You know, people keep saying the Queen should intervene. She can't do it. If she ever intervenes, it's the end of that authority. Or at least that's my view. I think it would end that authority, and that they can't face that. So actually, she's very wise. She just stays quiet, doesn't say anything. But anyway, that's the interesting thing. Is there anything more to say on that? Have I got that? Yeah? But it was interesting, isn't it? And that they've got this image. Sorry, I was just say one other thing. Roger and I were talking about, because I said, what image for today? What image might we bring into being? And the only image we've got so far is that of a Mobius strip. Do you all know that? It's Escher draws it. Did you bring something, Maddie? No. Okay, a Mobius strip is a continuous strip, right, of paper, say. And what happens is, you go along and it seems to twist. So you're always on the same side of the paper, no matter how you... Sorry, that might not explain it very well. You need to... Anyway, maybe we can get one made up for the end of the meeting. And we can show you. But the point about a Mobius strip is that the ensemble of relations is that no matter where you are, you're always in contact with the ensemble of human relations, human to human and human to nature. Yes, so you can no longer talk in terms of you no longer talk in terms of these isolated things, as it were, and assess things in their abstract. You have to deal with the ensemble of human relations in any aspect. And you could say that's reflected when we look in the modern day at how the crisis reveals itself. That it's so interesting that this issue of speaking in our own name is coming to the fore in every aspect. So in health, you find all over the country today people challenging Boris Johnson, who's gone there for a photo op, and they're going and they're saying, no, you're not speaking in my name, I'm speaking in my name, and I'm telling you my experience, and my experience is I've had no money for the healthcare. The healthcare is not operating in our area. You're not serving the people in the way that either you say or we want or we demand. So you could say that it's like people are talking to their own experience and their own knowledge of what's going on. And anyway, that's sorry, I'll stop.
I'm glad you explained the focus.
I'm not trying to do that. Oh yeah, that's it. Can you see? Yeah. So, and then the interesting thing about that Mobius strip, which is so weird, is if you cut it in the middle, right, and you cut all the way around the middle, can anyone tell me what might happen if I did that? If I just cut, if I put an incision in the middle and I cut all the way around, so I now have two circles. Does anyone know? They become linked, yeah. And then if you cut those two circles, you get 4 circles that are linked. And it's the weirdest thing ever. It's like, how did that happen? Yes? But that kind of is emblematic in a modern sense of the way societies now are very much, interlinked. You can't say, like if you were take this conception of a modern democratic personality, that person cannot exist on their own. They exist because they are part of the society and they reflect the concerns and the issues going on. So then the issue is to recognize that and to affirm that and to say, right, that's what we need going forward. All of us need to recognize that we are one society and the needs and concerns of the society are our needs and concerns, and we will fight for them. We're not going to leave it to some politician like Boris Johnson or whatever to make those decisions because these things are too important. Anyway.
It seems to me where we are today is the change where we can go forward as a mass and become important and have a say. So for me, it's exciting times for me in the last few years I've got to live. So I do recognise where it comes from, and I really think this has to be the way forward for us. Yeah.
I think that's very important, Julie, because I think you're right that I really know that I'm just talking about South Tyneside, where so many people have become involved in trying to change society, all of the fronts. I mean, I obviously speak about the campaign, which but there's so many other things that's going on, both outside political parties and inside political parties, and we're all trying to engage with each other, and that's the really important question, I think. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think Lesley referred to 1641, where there was this ferment prior to the revolution, and everyone was trying to engage. And of course, we all know about Cromwell. That's all you hear about. But actually, it's what happened before and up to then, and what happened that gave rise to that. So we want a very different outcome to this. And I think that's what Lesley's talk is trying to elaborate, because I think one of the problems is that we all tend to look at things from our own experience. So we don't try and look at things afresh and see what's before our eyes. We tend to look at things as they were. And of course, after the Second World War, for example, we were fighting fascism. I remember, when I was a youth, we fought the National Front before. But now you've got a problem that if you just use those definitions and somebody makes some inappropriate comments and and you just say, well, they're beyond the pale, they're fascists, then you're actually not realising what the situation is, that there's all this confusion amongst the people, and we need to engage with everybody to bring everyone to the conclusion that, you know, they are their own liberators. We need to work together and emphasise these points you're making, that, you know, everyone has rights in society and nobody should be excluded, and you know, if we keep fighting on that basis, we'll strengthen ourselves. Sorry, I know I'm going on a bit long, but that's, I think, it's really important. So we have to, I think the point about the truth of memory is we're not trying to replace any movement, but we're trying to look behind what is the truth behind this, and go into these questions more, so that people can benefit them and hopefully unblock the problems that they're facing. So if you're fighting in the Labour Party, for example, to try and stop various people trying to carry on with the neoliberal agenda, as it were, you know, you're able to you're empowered to deal with that. If you're fighting in other parties or in campaigns or whatever, you can see that, like in our Save South Tyneside Hospital campaign, for example, on Tuesday we're going down to London to challenge in the High Court the decision to downgrade on maternity, children's A&E and stroke. And we know already that it's causing disaster, and it's so important. But the point, we're not saying to people, let's use the court because that's democracy. That's it's all, we're using it from the point of view, how can we, as a people, block them from disempowering us? How can we throw a spanner in the works so they can't take power away from us? So we see it as a long term. We see it as a tactic, but we don't see it as a long term, that we need to rely on the courts or we need to rely on the Secretary of State. Yes, we may refer things to the Secretary of State, but all campaigns do, but it's about the people themselves becoming that new authority in society and striving for that empowerment. So I think I've never seen a time when, certainly in this area, where people have been so involved and mobilised. So that's what these discussions are about.
Can I just pick up on the point that Roger said there? I think that's very important. I think, like you two, I feel that this is a great opportunity to really sort of challenge sort of the model of the last 30 years that we've lived under. And I don't think we're going to get this opportunity again. I think it's really a case of putting the correct efforts into organising correctly, using the new technologies at our disposal, and I think as well, just being prepared for setbacks and realise it might just be, a long slog. But we can only really get out of it what we put in. I think at the end of the day, we are the people. And that is the thing. And it's about really bringing everybody together to that cause. So, yes, it is hard, but I think it's a very, very exciting time for potential change.
Just about democracy. I think things have been taken away from us. Everything now, all decisions are made behind closed doors. You just take the case of the CCG in the local hospital trusts. They're appointed by who were they appointed by? Who are the where are their kind of loyalties lying? We don't know. They can make decisions behind closed doors, and we have to try and break those doors down. And that goes all the way down society. All these kind of little enclaves of power have been everything happened behind closed doors. Accountability is not there anymore. There's no avenue to get to those decisions. That's what we have to break down. Those kind of those doors, basically, which have been erected over the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
Kind of all these kind of water companies being taken over by privatisation. We're having no legal opportunity to get those particular kind of organisations. So that's one case all the way through. And that's happened again and again and again over 40 years. We've got to break those barriers down again.
Can I just put in here? I think that's a very, very good point. I couldn't agree more, actually. It's something that I'm going to sort of go into in the 90s. How we do it is another matter. It's a case of how we sort of get them to see this power to us. What's the best method of doing it? How do we organise for that? Again, something I'd like to go into, maybe offer potential solutions, or is something that we might want to talk about.
I mean, I think this is exactly to figure out, because, I mean, Roger very neatly summarised, I think, what I meant to say in terms of empowerment. What you're referring to here is so important. It's like there is a new consciousness emerging. We all feel it, we all know. And it almost, you could say the reflection back in the 1640s was that consciousness was, they didn't have the modern conditions that we have now. So it was much easier to like marginalise, and that's what they effectively did. And now we're not being marginalised. As a force, we will not be marginalised. In fact, we are at the centre of things. That's the shift. And I think we're that close, actually, to saying that, in fact, it's even better than saying we will arrest power. The issue is they no longer have power. Like, the authority of the king stopped the minute that people did not recognise that authority. Yes, they beheaded him, that's also true, but the actual, which was a bit of a downer from his point of view, but but the point isn't that. The point is that actually was the final act. The final act of beheading the king came after the loss of the authority. It was the recognition that people did not buy into those arrangements anymore. So then new arrangements were brought into being. So then the question now is, those arrangements that were set in place in 1649 do not work anymore. They're not sorting anything out. So whatever they try to sort out using these arrangements, it gets worse. So like Brexit, what was it meant to sort out? Actually, I can't even tell you what it was meant to sort out. I have no idea what they think, except that we know that they were trying to solve contentions within their own parties. Like Boris had to, or Theresa had to, you know, placate the, what was Cameron at that point, wasn't it? It was an awful lot. Trying to placate the DUP, or anyway, they had their own issues. So they're trying to solve their party political differences. And what's clear is the outlook of the people now. What's emerging is that our consciousness is very different. We place our thinking somewhere else. We want a better environment for the world's people and for the young people coming forward. We want to solve these problems. We want to solve the problem of healthcare. Why is healthcare getting more and more like they're shutting hospitals? And anyway, you know all the problems. Why are these things not being addressed? Why is it that education is being just done away with? Why is it that we have world wars, or wars going on around the world, I mean, that are being done in our name? Why are these things happening? People are calling for an end to these things. And that's the consciousness, not just in Britain, but across the world. Look in the United States. The people are out on the streets in force. Look here, look in Australia, look in Europe, look in India, look in China. People are out on the streets and they are demanding a pro-social agenda be put on the table. So this is the consciousness. And the question is really now, how do you make sense of all of this and bring it into a new modern outlook? Well, I think the answer is that you give it a name. You say what we want is democratic renewal with this conception of a modern democratic personality who's not fighting for their own interests. I'm going to make some money out of it. I'm going to make my name in the world. It's not that. The issue is you do it on the benefit of all, because this is what's necessary to bring a modern society into being. Sorry.
I was just going to say, and I think I was talking to Roger about it yesterday, you can even see now with the general election coming up, all this tactical voting. It wasn't meant to be like that. People are voting for people who they don't want, just to keep somebody outside. That proves to me that the whole system's wrong. I mean, it's highlighting the fact that the system's wrong. And somewhere down the line, somebody's going to have to fix it. And I think it's made people aware that it's wrong. The whole Brexit thing and the climate change, I think it's made young people aware of what's going on, and it's gave them an interest. It's switched a lot of people off. But I think younger people, the climate change thing has really, it's really created a big interest with them. So between young people and old fogies like demonstrating, that, that's what it seems to be, doesn't it? You've still got your older generation, but there's quite a lot of young people out and about now, which I think is good. And other people that can change things.
I think that's a very interesting point. I think what we've got confronted with is that, getting back to what Richard was saying as well, I think Parliament at the moment and its political agenda really lost all legitimacy. That's what we're seeing now, and it's not just in Britain. Yeah, throughout Europe, North America, South America, this is something that's sort of emerged in the last 10 years. That's sort of washed over us. And I think there's a lot of people that simply not aware of it. I think that there are still people that think we can go on as normal with the same status quo when we obviously know that this history is a process, societies change, there comes a time when the sort of have to allow the old to die in order for the new to come into being. Yeah, which again is a very Civil War thing, isn't it? It's another interregnum. When there's rid of the king. So I thought, well, exactly that's the point. It's a case of, like you say, how do we sort of carry out democratic renewal? How do we bring about a new settlement? Burning questions, very, very burning questions. I remain optimistic.
Actually, my feeling is it's wonderful that you all come here today and that this meeting is happening. It's actually called it before the election, isn't it? Yeah. So it's very timely. It shows that you're very much in step with what's going on. And that what you have done here is you are giving voice to speaking in your own voice. And that's everything. To come here to grapple with these things, old, young, doesn't matter. That's the issue now. All of us have a voice. And now we're learning to use it.
Thank you, Lesley. I think you summed that up.
Oh, shut up.
Is there anything else?
She is a hard act to follow.
Sorry.
I'm going to sound all mechanical.
Oh, yeah, he's going to Parliament's friends anyway. Say what you like. So, should we move on then to the next?